Hi, and welcome to a new Mark Talks Mags. It's a bit of a weird one, this, because it's a very short one, and it's just a bit of a catch up on previous ones that I've done. And what I mean by that is that, as I have reiterated so many times so far, I'm purposely not looking at these papers and magazines before I dip in. So hence there'll be things I make mistakes about. There'll be things I miss, and that's where we come to this. So I've got two here: a record mirror from 1978 and Melody Maker from 1972 that I've already done. But on what I'm enjoying doing is, of course, when I've dipped into these, I'm seeing articles that I really want to read. So then I'm going back to them and reading those articles and finding things that I think, shit, I should have spoken about that in the Mark Talks Mags. So there's a couple of things here I'm just going to go back on. And so we'll go back to Melody Maker from July the 15th, 1972, which you may remember had Deep Purple on the front. Where the band was lifted for a big tour. That was the cover. You may remember that, but I can't remember what number Mark Talks Mags it was. But anyway, when I had finished doing the piece, I then sat down, as I do most nights, and read through the entire paper. And I got to the very last page, the back page, which was the letters page, and I just scanned over it without giving it much interest at all when I did the piece. But at the top, here we go, we've got solved the great Porky mystery. Now, anyone who's a bit of an anal record collector will know what I mean if I say Porky's Prime Cuts or such like. And records throughout the 70s and well up into the 80s would often have on the run out, etched into it, Porky, blah, 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 Porky's Prime Cuts, Porky this, Porky that. And it, for many years, people didn't know what the hell it was all about. But of course, today, with the internet, we all know what it was all about. But it's nice to see this letter, because it's from Porky, whose address here is Apple Records, 3 Savile Row, London, W1. And I'll read the entire letter. It says, "For the baffled millions and all those who have written in asking the meaning of engravings on LP and single records. Concerning the meaning of Porky, Pecco, Pecky and others, it's purely a nickname given to me by my comrades from Liverpool, as from hence I arrived. I am the chief cutting engineer at Apple Studios Cutting Rooms and have been mastering LP and single masters for 4 years now. Doubtless, if you look at some past records cut by Apple, a similar little insignia will appear in the middle. You may notice the Rolling Stones have also asked me to engrave on their records, but only to put Rolling Stones Records, not my nickname, as there would be no room left to stamp the record matrix number. I hope this information will help the baffled millions to sleep at night." And so there we go. In 1972, it was thought of as pretty unimportant. It's at the top of the letters page, quite a small letter, not particularly thought of as important. But of course, as time went on, through the punk years and beyond, Porky became something of a celebrity. And so that's nice to see. Maybe that was the first time that the Porky mystery was solved. So there we go. That was from Melody Maker, July 15th, 1972. And moving on, another catch-up. Just a brief catch-up on this. This is from Record Mirror, February the 25th, 1978. And you may remember this was the one with the beautiful young Kate Bush on the front, where I spoke about how this particular photo shoot, she hates it to this day. But after I'd gone through the paper, I've got to find it now, this particular thing, I went through it again, reading it all, and I've got to find it now, sorry about this. And I had just gone straight past this particular small piece about a band, and now I've got to find it, and I should have been prepared here, but there we go. About a band called The Makers. And I'm sorry about this, because I really should have been prepared. We got chance. Here we go. Page 10. And we'll scan a picture so you can have a look at that. Much to do about makers. That's the headline. And there's a photograph at the bottom of 5 young chaps looking very new wave, shall we say. Hair not quite in a punky style, but not in a longer style either. Somewhere in between. And under the photo it says The Makers, Poverty Stricken. Interview by Bev Briggs. And a quote saying, "We're not like the rest, we don't clean our teeth, and we've got some really bad habits." Well, some of you may have already realised who the Makers were. But at the start of the piece, it says dramatis personae. In other words, the people in the band. The Makers. Tony Hadley, Gary Kemp, Steve Norman, John Keeble, and Richard Miller, whoever he that may be. 5 poverty-stricken, talented young musicians struggling to make their mark in the bleak world of pop. Well, I'm sure you get it now. This is 1978, and this was Spandau Ballet. A few years before Spandau Ballet, and before the Blitz Club, and before they became the poster boys of the London New Romantic scene. And it's quite fascinating, really, because it goes through this interview with them, where the interviewer is trying to be a bit funny, so it doesn't work particularly well. But they clearly were a new wave band. They mention bands like the Yachts, who were a sort of pub rock new wave band and the like. Steve, a manager, who was Steve Norman, who played saxophone, I think, eventually in Spandau Ballet. But I remember the first article I ever read about Spandau Ballet. I remember it very well. It was a centre page in one of the music papers. And I think even then Steve Norman was touted as their manager rather than a member of the band. But interesting, and don't knock Spandau Ballet. They may well have become the polished pop idols who were the biggest rivals of Duran Duran. But they made some really good songs early on. I love To Cut a Long Story Short. I think it's one of the great singles of the 80s. Musclebound's pretty good. Chant the Madame is brilliant. They're a good band. They had some good licks. And so there we go. Much to do about makers. Well. Anyway, this was just a little short Mark Talks Mags. We just covered a couple of things that I missed before, and I'm sure this will happen again. And so there we go. Until the next time. See you soon. Bye.